company gets listed onto the Australian Small Scale Offerings Board is really quite a simple process. First and foremost, they have to actually engage what we call an accredited ASSOB sponsor. They can't actually list with us directly. If they do contact us, then obviously we'll put them in contact with an ASSOB sponsor. Typically, the company will already know an ASSOB sponsor. They'll engage that ASSOB sponsor, and those ASSOB sponsors are typically lawyers, corporate advisors, business consultants. They're already working with growing Australian companies. That ASSOB sponsor will then work with them to put forward the application, part 1 and part 2, which is basically the ASSOB process to go through the application stage and then the listing stage. It's really quite a simple process. And then what the sponsor will do is work with that company to get them investor ready. So once the company is then investor ready, up they go onto the ASSOB platform and the capital raising begins. In terms of how I guess the process of the company listing, as I said, there's part 1 and part 2. Part 1 is very straightforward, it's the application. Part 2 is the listing. If we have a look at the fees there from an ASSOB service, an ASSOB perspective, we're talking $990 for part 1 and $3,960 for part 2. So really quite cost effective for a company to go through from an ASSOB fee perspective. That's not including the ASSOB sponsor fees, which we'll talk about in a second. In terms of what they get for that, basically part 1 is submitted into the ASSOB Admissions Committee. The ASSOB Admissions Committee will then review the application from a legal perspective and a commercial perspective. Obviously the legal compliance side is critical. That's our primary role. The commercial perspective, we don't sit in commercial judgment, but we will give commercial feedback back to the ASSOB sponsor. And then what the ASSOB sponsor and the company do with that is obviously at their discretion. In terms of then, once that has been approved by the admissions committee, they've then got an in-principle approval to move forward to a full ASSOB listing. ASSOB will then build a profile page in what we call preview mode on the ASSOB platform. So what that means is they get one of these profile pages, which you'll see on the ASSOB platform that each company has. So if you click on each company name, it brings up this great little profile page profiling the actual company. So that's between the ASSOB sponsor, the company and ASSOB, we're starting to build that profile page even before the offer's open. And the beauty of that is when it's at a certain point and it's ready to sort of be made, the networks of the company are able to be made aware of with this particular profile page, then the company can then go out to all their networks and say, wonderful news, this is an example, wonderful news, we've just been approved to list on the Australian Small Scale Offerings Board. Because you're known to the company, we actually wanted to make you aware of this first. We're actually, we'll be opening the offer in the coming weeks, but in the meantime, here's a link, assob.com.au / then the 3-letter ticket code, and then basically that is drawing interest and awareness and anticipation for the impending offer. So it's a really wonderful little marketing strategy that ASSOB has created that allows the company to start building interest, awareness, anticipation even prior to the offer being open. Once the actual offer is open, then it's actually in what we call VIP mode. Now the beauty of that is that again, it's still not visible on the profile page, on the ASSOB platform. It's only accessible by that link that we talked about earlier. And the beauty of that is that again, the company can go out to all their networks and now say, wonderful news, our offer's now live on the ASSOB live on ASSOB. It's not fully visible yet because you're known to the company. We actually wanted to give you first look at the offer. So here's the actual offer. Have a look at it, but please be aware in a couple of weeks' time we'll actually be going fully live onto the ASSOB primary board. ASSOB has over 10,000 registered potential investors, so if you're interested, you might want to look sooner rather than later. So what that does is it gives the networks known to the company the first look in at that offer at the most heavily discounted rounds. That then gives the company the potential to fill some of their red squares and prove that there's some interest in that particular offer. The beauty of that is then in a few weeks' time we flick the switch and they become fully visible onto the primary board, hopefully with round 1 and potentially part of round 2 closed or filled, and announcements are then made in the ASSOB news. The sponsor can make announcements and the company can make announcements. Again, that's drawing more awareness of the offer to networks with or the ASSOB subscriber list. So if that company has gone through, raised 1 and 2 rounds, then obviously, and we've seen examples of that. As an example, Pressure Food went through round 1, round 2 in VIP mode. We flicked the switch, they went fully visible onto the primary board. Round 3, which was $1 million round, was then opened and closed in only a few weeks, and it was in fact over $1 million oversubscribed because of that momentum that was built up in the VIP mode. So there's a lot of thought that's gone into not only the compliance, the structuring of the offers, but also then the marketing of the offers. And then we move on to the actual, the other end of the spectrum is once the actual funds start flowing in. Again, ASSOB comes to the fore in that situation. We actually take care of a lot of the back of house services. Again, that brings or gives investor confidence and comfort to the equation, because you've got these investors. They know that the company isn't looking after the funds. It's actually going to trust. The funds are then cleared. We check it all off from a compliance perspective, and then once it's all checked off, then the funds are dispersed to the company, obviously minus the success fee for the sponsor and the ASSOB success fee as well. And all those funds are dispersed automatically. So there's a lot of checks and balances throughout the whole process there, which again add confidence and comfort from the investor perspective, so as opposed to if they were trying to do the capital raise themselves. There's a lot of processes and checks and balances in that equation. In terms of then so that's the ASSOB listing process. In terms of then, we look at the ASSOB sponsor side of the equation. Basically, as an ASSOB sponsor, basically what an ASSOB sponsor does is they get these clients investor ready. They'll then list them onto the platform and then give them strategic guidance in terms of feedback on the investor presentations. They're sitting on the actual side of the same side of the table for the companies as the company. So basically, when the company's walking into the room in terms of investor negotiations, they know they've got 3 parties on their side. They've got themselves, they've got their ASSOB sponsor, and they've got ASSOB, all driving to see this the company successfully raise capital. So they're in really good hands there, as opposed to really trying to do it themselves.